So when did you start getting into the whole like what I mean, I remember there was a term for a lot of these things. There was like the great debate was the atheist versus Christian debates. And those are gone
SJW
now.
versus anti SJW, right?
Yeah,
Was
yeah,
my
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Well, I was a viewer before I was a creator, so that was 2014. So that was
Mhm.
Gamergate and stuff like that. That's when I really got into it. That's when I stopped being a normie.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I think I was a
That's when
normie
you got
back
put
then.
on the
Like,
watch list.
I'm pretty sure I was almost a normie, but if it wasn't for the fact that I was a gamer, I would have been a full-on normie probably, you know, because I was still quite left-wing back then. Although I was not your run-of-the-mill one, really, when I look back. Like, I was never a feminist. I never really got it. Like, I was like, okay, yeah, equal rights and all that, but you definitely don't like men. I got that vibe, and then as the idiot artist that I am, I took it literally and thought, well, how can I be a feminist? I'm a man. Which ended up being
Well, that's a
the correct
turf line though.
decision. Well,
I
they're
thought, I
right
thought
in a way. A man shouldn't be a feminist, but for self-preservational reasons, because they're out to get you. And
Mhm.
I'm not joking; they are out to get you
Yeah.
for these crazy delusional sense of revenge, as if men had wronged women in some way, even though the history is way more complicated and on a case-by-case basis. It's not a long history of men hating women and oppressing them. It's not. And it's
No.
not vice versa either, but because then obviously there is an equal reaction to it. And finally, the red pillars, which I hate calling them red pillars because they're not red pilled. They
No,
may be a
they
little
took the
bit.
whole bottle.
Yeah, they took the whole bottle. Yeah, so people like uh, well, Andrew Tate's a grifter. All the pickup artists are grifters. They're not red pilled in any way.
Mhm.
There's a reason why they burn so bright and then die off so quickly.
Yeah.
Like Rouge V, those types of people. Like the reason why
Davis
that stuff has
Arini.
happened. Yeah, I guess he was kind of like that, wasn't he? A
Yeah.
little bit. I know all the keyboard shortcuts. I think it's gotten worse since him.
Yeah.
There's way more pretentious so-called right wingers than there was back in the day.
Yeah, I think he was overdoing it, but I think the people that are being pretentious now, they're a little bit more effective at it. Like it's getting past the smell test of more people was what I mean. Not so much that they're better people.
Well, when they're all huffing their farts, how can they tell?
But I remember you did a video not too long ago talking
Hmm.
about how a lot of right wingers and conservatives and Republicans and Tories were taking up like sides with TERFs, which are trans exclusionary radical
Yeah.
feminists, and it's because they may be right on a couple of issues, and they think that like if they take their side that that these people can change, or that these people are good or something like that, or they have some common ground when they really don't. A lot of their kind of criticisms of that whole kind of movement stem from a very different worldview that is completely incompatible. In the same way that like when I see like anarchist like communists try to like, or when I see like anarcho-capitalists try to team up with anarcho-communists and be like, well, we're both against the state. It's like, yeah, if you redefine the state in two different ways, then we have that in common. But in practice, they don't. They're very much for
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah. So like, I understand that. Yeah, when there's an issue such as the trans issue
Mm-hmm.
that is so hot button, and it is really important because it is affecting not just the lives of adults, but now it's affecting children, that you will inevitably end up like that stone toss meme when you're doing the tug of war and then you turn to the side and you see this random person who you hate on your side. I understand that's going to inevitably
Huh?
happen, right? Huh? Right? Yeah, that's going to happen. I understand. But it should only ever be about convenience. But the problem is a lot of the people on the right, and I've seen it with the Lotus Eaters with Posey Parker. They actively endorse these people. It's not a case of we'll put you on our show just to get your point of view, so we understand this side of the debate. Like they did that during Brexit. They did it correctly, where they Tony Benn is he's no longer with us. He was a Labour MP, a really famous one. But he was anti-Brexit. That was the old Labour of the 70s and 80s and 60s, more 70s and 80s. And and like Sargon would show his views and stuff like that, but he didn't endorse him as a fellow Brexiteer. It's just, this is a guy from the left. We are totally opposite. Yeah, when it comes to Brexit, look how powerful these arguments are. And other people did it with other Labour MPs from back in the day, although they didn't really talk to ones from now, because it was never a polarized left-right issue as the media and the academia have successfully painted it as. It was never like that. Maybe in the 80s when the Tories were the Remain party and stuff like that, but by the 21st century, it was left and right. Nobody endorsed the other side. It was, we are Brexit, we are fighting for Brexit, or we are fighting for Remain. It's convenience, and then once this is done, we'll go back to each other's throats. But with the TERFs, it seems to be different. It seems like these are people we should be allied with. We should, or at the very least, be friendly with. I'm like, we shouldn't be friendly with these people because we were fighting them not too long ago. These were the people who were spearheading the initial censorship and destruction of the English language and God knows what other foreign language to make it more gender neutral. Because I remember as a kid, literally right in front of me, they were changing, trying to change. They did successfully, at least when it came to job description stuff like that. They stopped calling people actresses or saleswoman or waitress, and would just use
stewardesses.
Yeah, they'll just use the male version as a neutral pronoun. That was the TERFs. Maybe the intersectionals as well, but nobody really heard of them at the time,
And I remember this was like, even in the 90s, like there was the history thing where they were trying to change history. And a lot of people were upset because it was like, like you're trying to change history. It's like, well, sort of. They're doing something more nefarious. They're destroying language.
They started all that stuff. And in fact, when you look at Germaine Gray's work, when you look at I'm trying to think of other TERFs. There are other TERFs. A lot of them are postmodernists, like her, and they deconstructed masculinity. And then they influenced the people after them who were intersectionals, who then thought, well, if we can deconstruct masculinity, we can deconstruct femininity. Maybe, obviously, when they deconstructed femininity, it was for good. For them, it was for good, but they've ended up creating a monster that they can't control or don't want to control. And we're now at a point where they're fighting. This is a feminist civil war. We should really be picking sides in that civil war. We should be egging both on to destroy each other. But apparently not. J.K. Rowling is now based because she doesn't like trans people. I'm like, well, no. Bear in mind, she was all for the woke stuff until it affected her.
Yeah, I remember her and Molyneux used to get into it back and forth.
Yeah, like she said Hermione was black at one point, even though she knew Hermione wasn't black. She wrote her as white because in some random play in some random place they did like a play version of Harry Potter, and they cast a black girl to play Hermione, and then she defended it, saying, "Oh look, well, Hermione's black, Dumbledore's gay," even though Dumbledore was not written as gay in the books. Apparently, like she never mentioned his sexuality. She just retroactively said that he was gay, and that became a meme, didn't it? Like, oh, look at her. She's retroactively changing her canon without writing anything to appeal to these SJWs, because she is one. But once she says trans women aren't women, oh no, I'm one of you guys now. Like, no, far too many people support her. Like, look, it's one thing to like support her rights and stuff, to say what she wants to say, but we should be supporting her goals. Because ultimately, it's not about trans people with TERFs. It isn't, because they don't see trans people as trans. They see them as men or women. If you're male to female, if you feel female to male, I guess you're a traitor. They don't really talk about female to male much, to be fair, TERFs. But I imagine they see them as gender traitors, whereas they really don't like the male to female because they see them as infiltrators. Like the patriarchy has sent them in there to disrupt the feminist movement and the sisterhood, even though, in my opinion, the reason why they are the way they are is because we've potentially maybe have made a mistake in how we deal with gender dysphoria. But that's a debate we should have, really. Should it be therapy? Should it be surgery? I still haven't really made my mind up on that, but we could have potentially made a mistake if you think about it. That even after surgery, there's a high suicide risk.
Yeah, there's
we don't
there's
talk
no
about
evidence that any of that stuff fixed.
Yeah, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about well, some people do. The ones who really have their ear on the ground, they don't talk about how the whole TERF thing really is just man hatred. That's really all it is. It is.
Yeah, they
And
just
I
don't.
can't ally
They just see
myself
them
with
all as
them. I
men.
can't, because
They hate men.
I
Yeah.
could. I could be playing tug of war with a lesbian feminist as long as she's not like a rabid anti-male. I mean, she's going to be anti-male anyway as a feminist, but as long as she's not too much of a TERF, it'd be all right. But I've got to watch my back at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But
Maybe,
nobody's
maybe
watching their
more.
back. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more old school ones, or yeah,
Mm.
those tend to be a little
I,
bit. But I mean, those are very
well,
few and far between, and it's you might as well just
mm.
assume that those don't
Camille
exist.
Paley is the only one worth listening to, in my opinion.
I heard that like Helen Joyce was a turf, but I mean, I
I
read her
mean,
book
everybody's
Trans.
a TERF nowadays.
Yeah, yeah, I mean,
even
everybody. Yeah.
even if you're not a feminist,
I've been
you're a
called
TERF.
that. Yeah, and
Yeah, I've
I'm
been
like
called that. I'm like, if only you knew.
yeah, like no. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure because it didn't like as I read that book. It's a really great book. She wrote a
Mm,
book called Trans, and it's about the whole
mm.
gender ideology thing and
But
what
this
it's
is
doing to women
the
and
flip
children.
side of it. Yeah, women and children, as opposed to who it's really been affecting for far longer, men and boys.
Hmm.
In fact, it was boys who were experimented on first, and
Hmm.
men. But apparently, it's a female problem. But that's just society, isn't it? Women most affected. It only gets dealt with when women start feeling the effects. You know.
Speaking of speaking of gender ideology, let's talk about pedos.
Uh oh,
I remember so
nonsense.
I remember you were talking about Amos Yee like long before like he was even on my radar because I didn't not know who he was. I've heard some
Big
rumblings of who he was.
fucking strokey nonce.
Yeah, that guy. Um, and I remember you did some like video. You did some video about him like way back in the day, and I was like,
Hmm.
I can't be bothered with this.
Yeah, he was
Um,
defending the pedos, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mm,
see the thing, like a lot of times, like people will make like these kind of statements, and when you're talking about a lot of people who spend people like us who spend
mm,
like hours and hours and hours behind a microphone and putting our stuff out in the public, eventually
mm,
we're going to say something stupid, or something that we didn't really think about
mm,
too much, and we just kind of go like, well, this kind of makes sense. And then when you really
mm,
think about it, you're like, oh, that's really bad. And it's when you kind of delve into topics like children and sexuality,
mm.
that opens up a giant can of worms that no one agrees with. And as soon as you have like one mild disagreement with any of that stuff, like, oh, you're a
You're a
pedophile, you need
nonce.
to go,
You're a
yeah.
pedo.
So like and I knew this really kind of early on. So like
Mm,
I was always kind of skeptical of anybody who was
mm.
going around claiming people were pedophiles. Like that's always was a giant like. But
I
now it
wasn't the
seems to
only
be like,
person who responded to that as well. I wasn't the only
yeah.
one. But the thing is, he kept doing it, and people were wondering, is it a troll? Is it not a troll? I mean, he kept doing it, and he was always
So wait,
serious.
we shouldn't bury the lead. We should actually say who Amos Yee
All
is.
right, so Amos Yee
Yeah.
is a Singaporean troll slash uh, activist. I really don't know what he was. He came to fame because in Singapore, which is Disneyland with the death penalty, to quote William Gibson, it's a very authoritarian country.
Mhm.
Like obviously nowhere near as bad as China, but basically you can get the cane for littering.
Yeah.
They also
There
have
was a big story in the 90s.
that was William
It
Gibson.
was
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was so big
Mm,
that
mm,
Weird Al included it in one of his songs called Headline News, which like the three stories that were in that were like the big stories of the day, which was Lorena Bobbitt, Tanya Harding, and this guy who went to Singapore and brought a lot of can of spray paint and they caned him.
yeah. And William
'Cause
Gibson wrote a whole article about Singapore and how it's not this perfect world that people say it is. It's quite authoritarian and stuff like that.
someone should send that to Matt Walsh.
Matt Walsh is an idiot.
Yeah,
Uh,
he is.
but anyway, so he in Singapore they have really strict speech laws in regards to religion and stuff like that. Not because it's not because they're woke or anything like that. It's for another dumb reason. It's because they want societal harmony because Singapore was actually it's quite an artificial city state because it was actually created by the British as a
Oh, to Hong
naval.
Kong, yeah.
No, Hong Kong was always Hong Kong. It was always a village surrounded by a load of islands and stuff like
Mhm.
that. That was a lease anyway, except for one part of it, which was actually part of Britain, which we gave back. But that's complicated history. But Singapore, we built ourselves. We founded that, and obviously it was always going to be mostly Asian because that's what it was built for. But it was mainly a naval base for trade and under the Royal Navy, and eventually became its own country, city-state. And it's full of different ethnicities and religions. So you've got Buddhists, you've got Hindus, Muslims, Christians, a lot of Christians because of the British connection, and they want societal harmony. So they outlaw anything that could be offensive or cause civil disturbance in regards to religion. And what he did, because he was an edgy boy atheist, he criticized Islam. I think he may have done Christianity too. So he was making fun of them and stuff like that. And he did stuff with the Quran that you shouldn't do. And he got put in jail for it. And then eventually this reached the West, and we obviously had an outcry over this. How dare the Singaporeans do this? Which is fair enough, that they shouldn't be. Like, I mean, if they're that worried about civil disturbances in regards to religion, maybe they should allow their people to have a bigger backbone. But that's just my opinion. You know, I don't know. Deal with the banter. But yeah. So he applied for. Eventually, he applied for asylum and got it. And then, as soon as he got that, he started talking about paedophiles. So it used to just be religion and stuff like that. And he did actually attack the far left, but then he became a commie. That could have been trolling. He was a troll. And because he had this history of trolling, people didn't take him. Some people did, some people didn't. Like, well, he could just be taking the piss. Like, this is... He may be saying this stuff about paedophiles, because what he was saying was kids can consent and stuff like that. Or at least some kids. And like, not all paedophiles are evil and stuff like that. The usual stuff that we now know they say, but back then it was like, what? And then he kept doing it and doing it and doing it. He'd disappear for a while, come back, and then say it again. And then eventually, a few years later, while he's in his American home, he's arrested. And what was he trying to do? Solicit sexual favors from a young girl. I can't remember how old she was. Was she about 14 or younger, something like that? Yeah. So that confirmed to everybody it wasn't a troll. Even though anybody who could have told you, who listened to what he actually said, could tell you he wasn't trolling. We didn't think he was necessarily a pedo. We just thought he was misguided, because there are some people who support them and who are not pedos, who are misguided. A lot of them are on the left, but you know.
So he went to jail.
Then again, there are people who
And nothing of value was lost.
But then again, there are people who don't consider themselves paedophiles, who turn a blind eye and encourage women to be paedophiles towards boys. So, you know.
Yeah. And it does strike, and it's weird.
Nice.
It's so weird. Then I'll talk to a lot of atheists and stuff, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, we need to abolish the Catholic Church."
I mean, as an Englishman, I don't mind that. But
okay, Jesus.
Faithist yoke.
We're gonna go
Sorry,
down.
Harry.
We're gonna.
No, we're not gonna go down there.
Okay, Church of England.
I'm an atheist, so you know, guys.
Yeah, they're like, well, they have like this where they protect pedophiles, and there's so many pedophiles in there. It's like, well, even per capita, even if you count it even per capita, it's like you have 100 times more likely chance of getting molested or sexually assaulted by a teacher than you do a Catholic priest. And I've had arguments with people who are like, well, but there's far more public schools than that. And it's like, no, per capita, per capita. I have to keep reminding them, like, no, this is per capita, buddy. And it's just like, and it's just like it doesn't register. And then I'll go and check on them, like whatever. Because sometimes I'm one of those people that, like, I'll get in an argument with someone and I'll put a reminder, like, remind me in like 6 months. I put it in my calendar, so a little thing like, remind me to check this count and see what they're saying. And they're still going around spreading that stuff. It's like, oh my god, here we go. And it's usually in public schools. It's usually female teachers with young boys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when those get on the news, everybody goes like, well, look,
nice.
Kid. Nice.
Who's the nonce then? That's probably worse than anything Nambler have ever said. That's societal wide tolerance of nonces.
Nice.
I actually... Don't tell me you met him too. Oh, god damn it.
I've never met him. No. Never met him. I know of him, obviously. But, but like, this is what I don't get. Like, It's societal wide tolerance of nonsense. I actually hate female paedophiles more than male paedophiles because, at the very least, male paedophiles get punished and are rightfully hated, but the female ones just get a free pass. And
They get
I
a slap on
remember
the wrist,
years
too.
ago, there was a video that a female psychologist who was interviewed by somebody did. He described how they operate. They operate way worse than male ones. They're far more manipulative, and because they're under the radar, they can get away with it. And they can. And the thing is, they can, if the boy is old enough, they can play it against him. They can say that he did something to them and he will get in trouble. And that's how a lot of them get groomed. And then when they want to speak out or they want to talk about it, they'll threaten the boy. Like, no, I'll tell them that you did something to me. And who are they going to believe? They're going to believe her. The thing is, they still get punished. They still get punished, to be fair. The female nonsense, I'm not saying that they don't. When they get caught, they get punished. But it's as if we should let them go. It's ridiculous because I don't get it. If you're against nonsense, you're against all of them.
But I have noticed that there is a shift.
It's changing.
I mean,
it's changing. Yeah.
And it's not just a shift in that. I mean, like I've started to notice that, like, I remember when I was younger, and when those news things would come along, it was universal. Everyone was like, "Nice." I think South Park kind of got a lot of people kind of rethinking about that with that episode. And then, but the thing that's been really kind of interesting to watch is like the like everyone shifting against the kids stuff with the trans kid stuff. And that's been kind of white pill lately. Especially when you have like a publication like the New York Times, right? I believe right now they're still having demonstrations outside of the building.
Really?
Yeah, there's demonstrations going on outside of the building demanding and calling them a right-wing newspaper because they hired
former newspaper.
I think his name is David French, who's like a conservative writer, but he is very like the most milquetoast conservative. I mean, he kind of seems more like a Southern Democrat, than he is like like an actual Republican
racist?
or anything.
No, I'm joking.
Not that kind, not the Dixiecrats. A little bit later, a little bit more socially conservative, but not completely. Kind of like more like a moderate. He's definitely a moderate.
Right now.
But they hired him, but that's not really. I mean, that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. What's been upsetting them is there has been 3 that they're citing, and I know there's a 4th one because it's an article that I've been sharing a lot. Articles about how it's probably not that it definitely is. It's probably not a good idea to give kids hormone blockers and surgeries and that sort of thing. And there's currently well, I don't know if it's currently they might have wrapped it up. They get lazy, they get tired really quickly. Brittle bones, osteoporosis, and all that stuff from a lot of those medications. But they were protesting outside of the New York Times, and I'm starting to see like this kind of shift. But in some ways it's good, in other ways it's bad. I remember there was that Oklahoma bill where they were trying to ban any kind of trans anything.
Yeah, they tried to do that in Scotland, the devolved parliament.
It was 28.
Yeah,
no, it was they were trying to ban it for anyone under the age of 26.
Sorry, I missed. I thought it was like a gender bill or something in Oklahoma.
No, the one that they passed was 18, but the one that was on the floor originally, and they modified it to be 18.
I think it should be 26. Honestly, maybe I think that's a good age.
I think that's probably the appropriate age that you need that you're at the right mental state for that. But if you're an adult, you should be able to. If you're 18, you should be able to drink. You should be able to smoke, and you should be able to.
Like we do over here.
Maybe 21. I get a lot of shit from people when I say like maybe the age of consent should be 21.
Well, like this is the thing. Like in Scotland, in the devolved parliament, a lot of foreigners think they're in an independent country. They're not. It's a devolved parliament. Even my city, where I live, my area is devolved
Scotland
slightly. Yeah, well, Scotch. So the devolved parliament tried to enact a law that would give recognition to trans kids and stuff like that. It's just, the usual stuff that they want enacted in law, even though the current trend in Europe in general, well, the world really, is trans kids shouldn't be a thing, that we shouldn't be giving them puberty blockers and stuff like that. But Nicola Sturgeon thought the wisest course of action that will keep her in power, even though she doesn't need to do this because the SNP will always be voted for. They don't want independence, but they want the Gibbs, and they give the most Gibbs. The best thing for her parliament, for her party, is to enact this law, and it did pass because they're the majority. It was always going to, but then Westminster struck it down, which they have the power to do because it's horrible. It's disgusting. Because that's not where the wind is going, Nicola. And then a few weeks later, she's resigning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even though Britain hasn't yet enacted laws against it, it will happen. Like the general culture is this should not be allowed, and I think the Tories understand that, and Labour understands it even though they have a really loud screeching intersectional element. Keir Starmer's too much of a pragmatist to completely ignore the other side, which is don't do this. I think he would probably let the Tories have their way eventually when we do pass a law against it, because everywhere else has it. Even places you wouldn't think to pass laws against this have done, like Sweden. I think a lot of the Scandinavian countries have. The Netherlands definitely did at some point.
Yeah,
like, it's over.
Sweden?
It was over before they had a chance to get this off the ground. Like, nobody was going to agree to this. Nobody, except for the most radical, vaguely Nazi types. You know what I mean?
I don't know. There's this group that kind of satirizes this caucus. There's like this Libertarian Party caucus.
Oh, do you mean the classical liberal caucus?
Yeah, I don't. Maybe I'm not sure. There's like some other group that like makes fun of them. Like there's a little satire account or whatever.
It's not us, is it?
Yeah, but I guess the people that they were satirizing, the actual people, maybe I'm not sure. I don't know too much about it.